Dan Hurley to Kentucky? You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver who likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Well, Dan Hurley to Kentucky? I don't think so. Here with me today to laugh in the face of such ridiculous rumors is Matt Edwards, writer and creator of the Dream Season Pod. Matt, I'll let you get the first joke in on Danny Hurley, a Jersey boy, Northeast to his core, going to Lexington, Kentucky. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's again, money talks. So if they drop a big enough bag, who knows what could happen? But I would think that's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
Okay, so that's a great thought, and we'll get into reasons why he won't go. But let's talk about that. What would be the number if you're Dan Hurley and you have to convince your beautiful and talented wife Andrea Hurley to move out of the Northeast and step foot in the state of Kentucky? What's that number look like?
That's a great question too. I mean, they're living in a different world than the rest of us, so he's already making more money than we could probably spend in a long time. So
sure.
I mean, double what he's currently making, possibly to sell, set the great grandkids up forever. I don't know. I mean, again, it's like you said, there's a lot to weigh in a decision like that. And it's got to be more than money. And I don't think money is a factor for them. But so that's a great question.
Yeah. He signed a 6-year, $32.1 million contract to remain with the team after the national championship last year. So it puts him through 28-29 season, which I'm sure if all things go well, we'll talk about game day later in segment 2, and they win another title, I would think that UConn would like to reassure him with a pay raise and a pay bump. But if you're making, is that about $6 million a year? If my math, yeah. I'm terrible with math, but so about 6.1 or $6 million and change. I mean, if I'm Dan Hurley and they approach me, I would say, pay me $20 million a year and I'll think about it.
Right.
Like something ridiculous, because that, I mean, I don't think even Kentucky would do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But again, let's go back to Andrea Hurley, because I listened to a podcast with Rob Douster, Top Dogs, and he was talking about, he interviewed her, and it was a lovely story. I really enjoyed the insight that he brought to UConn Nation with talking to her just about Dan in general, right? Not the coach Dan. And he brought us back to a time when UConn was not as good, subpar on especially for UConn standards. And he was preparing his wife essentially like, we could get fired. And her kind of thought process is like, what will his mental health be if that's the case? So I'll ask you this. If you're Dan Hurley and you had this opportunity where Kentucky says, we'll give you $18 million or $20 million to come to Kentucky and rebuild this, how are you selling your wife, who basically has seen you transform from, a mental, having panic attacks, having all these issues, to now being a little more calm, having some, for Dan Hurley standards, a little more mental calm? Like, how would you even present that to your wife?
I don't know if you could. I mean, like, the pressures he's under now and has been is pretty high. I mean, the bar is set high at UConn. It's pretty high at Kentucky too, and he'd be starting from low, and it would be complete opposite of where he's at now. And like you said, all the progress that he's made for himself mentally and with everything else he's dealing with, and to have to reset that away from the area that they've lived in their whole life, the Northeast, in the past 15 years in Rhode Island and Connecticut, that's a tough sell. I don't know how we could do that, or how she would improve that.
Yeah, I also feel like too, it's like, I think the beauty of Connecticut, and I don't live there anymore, but when I did, was especially as a younger man, is like having options, right? You live in the center of the Northeast, where on any given day you can take a ride to Boston, on any given day you can take a ride to New York or take a train. And the state in itself has its own advantages. I mean, hell, the best pizza in the world is in New Haven. How do you leave that, right? So I think I'm being silly, but I just don't understand the mentality. I guess if Danny was a different part of his life, if he was in his 40s, if he was around my age, and he had young kids, and they could kind of like start fresh at Kentucky, even off of all the success at UConn, I could see it more. But do you think it has more to do with wishing that he leaves? Like, I feel like this is being pushed a lot by like Providence fans because they feel jilted by Ed Cooley and things like that. Do you think there's some of that that's going on?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, he's at the top of the profession right now. So everybody wants him. He's the hottest name. Everybody thinks they, would just take money to get him. And I don't think it's simple as that. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I would imagine that Dan Hurley would prefer retirement or coaching free clinics in New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, preferable to stepping foot in the state of Kentucky. That would be my
Absolutely.
thought process. But then again, you're right. I make a living doing something. If another company came to me and said, we're going to quadruple your salary, but you have to live in Ohio, there may be some pull there. I don't know. But again, I have young kids. I don't think I could. Like, there wouldn't be an option. So I would find it really hard pressed to move on. What's your favorite? Have you seen any of these kind of message boards or anything from people that are saying that Dan Hurley is going to go to Kentucky? Have you noticed any of that yet, or no?
I've seen some of the screenshots and just said, "Oh, he's coming," and we're going to get Hurley. And it's like you said. I mean, there's another thing that I'd read before that how long does he want to keep coaching for? Another 10
Right.
years? He said he wanted to retire at like 60. He didn't want to keep going forever. And to start over at a place that probably has more pressure, where the fans are insane, and there's nothing else going on there, just like there is here pretty much. And it's worse. It's worse. So I can't imagine that's something that appeals to him.
Yeah, I do from the other side of the aisle. I do think and I don't think there is such a thing, but I will give them some grace here. To the reasonable Kentucky fan, I think there has to be some want for this to happen, because you see what he's done here at UConn in a relatively short period of time has created this. We did a episode yesterday with Michael Cohen on his article about the offensive juggernaut that he's built here. And I think that it's been done with such thoughtfulness around who they recruit, the type of people they recruit, the type of people they get in the transfer portal. So it's not just about getting the 5 or 6 5-star athletes just to kind of come on your team. And I understand why that's attractive, but I also don't understand. I don't understand how Dan Hurley would kind of entertain doing what he's doing at UConn and then and trying to recreate that someplace else, unless it's at a higher level, right? I think the only pull for me is the NBA. Your thoughts?
Yeah, but again, does his coaching style translate to the NBA today? I mean, I'm sure he factors all this stuff in. He knows what's going on. The X's and O's would appeal to him, but having to sit down with people that are making more than he is, and not that that's the motivator, but they're tough to get to buy into his system. And we see the clips of him practicing and with the wrench, and that's not going to work on 28, 30-year-old guys that are just, come on,
making as much as him.
else.
They're making as much as him. Yeah, I had a buddy tell me, and I agree with it, which is Dan Hurley to the NBA would be interesting, but the only thing is, from an X's and O's perspective, you're right. I think he would be great, and I think his offense would have no issues in the NBA, obviously. But it's more about, at UConn, it's your program. When you go coach the Knicks, or the Celtics, that's not yours anymore. You're the coach. You have to answer not only to the ownership, but likely to players, which is not what you have to do at the college level. So,
Correct.
But let's get off this silliness. We'll talk about more important things and UConn game day after this. This episode is brought to you by spring cleaning champions Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out that winter bush with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom with springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special offer. Go to manscaped.com, use code LOCKEDON for 20% off and free shipping. I've been using Manscaped for over 3 years, and there is no better product on the market to groom your beard and honestly your whole body. Grab a beard hedger pro kit and save money on beard trims at the barber. Save yourself any anxiety you have shaving below the belt with its 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, or else maybe you might be saying yikes. Get 20% off, free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning in your pants. Let's get to our next sponsor, Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry about when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions may apply. Create an account, redeem the code, spell out Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Maybe if you have Game Time app, you can go to Brooklyn today to watch our beloved Huskies. I'm sure the tickets, I'm sure tickets are pricey, but I'm sure you can get in. I think I saw some screenshots of $20, $30 to get in. If I was in the area, I would 100% go. So get that checked out. Matt, game day. Are you nervous?
Always. I forgot I had a conversation with on Twitter the other day. It's a unique phenomenon, especially when March hits. The Big East tournament, it ramps up. You still get nervous of the one and done. You're going to be going home, but the big tournament is a whole other level. I'm nervous. I don't care who the opponent is. I'm nervous.
What do you attribute that to? Do you think, because I had a guest on, I forget which day it was, but talking about UConn as this kind of underdog mentality from the start, right? I think right now we're on the top of the sport and we've been in that position multiple times, obviously, but there's something about as an homage to your podcast, Dream Season Pod, to go back to that first team that really kind of laid the foundation. I really find that that's part of why I'd still get nervous. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. It's not just that season, but it's all the season. It was the NIT the year before that when they lost to UAB in the 89 NIT, and then just all the Duke game, and then the Boston College game. It just goes on and on and on. There's so many hits in the UCLA game, and AJ Price against San Diego State. There's always something. Obviously, this year's a weird dichotomy because they're so good and they should win. The weaknesses are so few, and we know what the hiccups could be, but it's like, how do you balance that between thinking like, oh, we should be fine, no big deal, just go take care of business like last year, and knowing that anything could happen and we could be like, oh my God, what just happened?
What do you prefer? Because I agree with you. What do you prefer in terms of going into the tournament? I know this is the first time it's happened, but it's not the first time we've been a number 1 seed. You go in as the number 1 seed, or you go in hot as like a 2 or 3 seed, like we've seen in the past, and make a run that way.
That's a good question. When you're hot and a lower seed, it's like the expectations aren't there. So I theoretically shouldn't feel as bad if they get knocked out, but it still does. So I kind of think I'd rather have the heavy wears the crown. I'd rather go in, want to be the big dog on the block that people come after, and let's take care of business and let's just show everybody what's going on.
Have you done any research on Stetson and their team at all?
No, other than listening to Jared's podcast with their coach and hearing that they shoot some threes pretty well. Yep. They have a couple good guards, and they're not that deep. The defensive metrics don't seem to be too good, so I think that makes me feel a little better. But again, we've seen what happens when teams can get hot from deep, and if we're cold and start slow again, if someone get foul trouble, I'm always nervous. Always nervous.
Yeah. What's the ideal start for you today? You mentioned starting slow. Like what would calm Matt Edwards' nerves? If you had a camera There's a documentary being filmed on you today in this UConn experience. What are they going to see from you, and what would calm your nerves?
Stetson taking a timeout before the first media timeout with UConn up 14-zip.
So a couple touchdown lead.
Couple touchdown lead, a couple Cam fist pumps, and Donovan dunks, and ready to go. Just end it right there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, one of the beauties of last year's run was how uneventful all of the games were outside of the Iona first half. I mean, that was I literally, I remember this text because, and I've probably referenced him on every podcast of every day, which is crazy because Mikey Casey and I grew up together in Meriden, Connecticut. We actually live here in Greensboro, random, right? Known him since I was 5 years old. And so he's a UConn grad. We talk about UConn all the time. I'll never forget the text I sent him when we're down. I think we're down 1 against Iona or whatever it was. I was like, we're going to lose this game. So to give you what you feel, you're not alone in this UConn fandom, and I'm sure anybody that listens to this has that same feeling. So it's it feels different for me this year. I don't know if I'm definitely not enlightened because I can feel myself getting nervous now talking about it. But do you think that'll ever change for you, or do you think you are who you are?
Probably not. I mean, it in one sense, like everybody is worried about the bracket when the bracket came out. I'm like, there's nobody. We know the team. We all year long it was Purdue, Houston, maybe Tennessee that could give you kind of run. None of those teams are in our bracket right now. And yes, we're not going to have to play Auburn or Illinois. We could play one or the other. So it's not like we get to play all these teams. Who knows if they're going to make it? So I don't worry about individual matchups so much. It's just like anything can happen. It's just I worry about everything. I don't even want to say the word I think about a lot. I think about so many things that could go wrong, and I think it's a New England mentality. I'm not a Red Sox fan at all. I'm a Mets fan, which has been bad enough, but it's I've seen we've had so much success with UConn. It's wonderful. I do not take it for granted, and I just worry that every time we think something good is going to happen, I don't know. I just don't want to jinx it myself by thinking anything ahead of time.
Yeah, you're spot on about the New England mentality because, I am not a Red Sox fan. I have said that the beauty of UConn is we all get to kind of congregate in the same church, even if you're a Red Sox, Yankees, Mets, Giants, Jets, Patriots, all of these sports teams that are kind of like around the state. So I am don't be mad at me. I am a Yankee fan. But it's one of those things where I feel a different sense with UConn. It's the team that I've always kind of lived and died with. I mean, if the Yankees win the World Series, will I be happy? Yes. Is that going to happen? Probably not. And I don't care. You know what I mean? Like that's the difference. Like the difference between being a UConn fan and being a fan of another team. I think the only second place for me is the Giants, because they brought me joy at times as a kid and then as an adult. But this whole UConn, like starting this tournament as the number 1 overall seed, there's been for me a theme of disrespect, and I think a part of it is the tournament itself is predicated on parity. And even though we want number 1 seeds in the Final Four for ratings, at least the networks do, people love Oakland beating Kentucky. The amount of negative press Purdue got for losing to FDU, like, you're right. I just don't want UConn to have that happen. And we had one of those situations when we lost to George Mason in 2006, right? Yeah. So do you think that's part of it too? Is like the disrespect is I don't think they want UConn to go back to back. That's just my opinion.
I can see that. Again, the whole power conference dynamic of what's going on is, how college football is just ruining everything with everything going on there. So I think there may be, behind the scenes, I don't know how much they can influence the committee. The committee, who knows if they're just inept or they're getting, the puppet strings pulled by the networks and other power brokers. But I can see that for sure. I mean, they don't benefit as much with UConn winning it all as they do if, a SEC team or a Big Ten team does.
Yeah. And I also feel like too, it's a bigger story if UConn loses. It just is with how dominant they've been this year. I think that's part of it. I had a prominent coach tell me, I will not name him because then he would not be my friend anymore. Say that you're probably not going to see Final Four with FAU, San Diego State this year. He's like, because they took such a big hit on their ratings with how much UConn killed everybody. So he's like, don't be surprised if you see Houston, Purdue, and then a 1 and a 2 seed on the other side of the Final Four too. In fact, that's how I did my bracket this year, is essentially just being like, we're not going to see San Diego State this year. We're not going to see, we'll hope not. We're not going to see, a 4 or 5 seed coming out of the West. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like, did you do a bracket this year? Who do you have in your Final Four?
I know I'm not in the last. I did Little Red's little pool there. I'm not last, so I feel good about that. I have obviously UConn winning it all. I'm not interested. I don't think I'm going to. I never do well in these, so I just have to go with the Huskies. And I think I have them. I think I had the 3 Big East teams in there with Houston.
Love it.
I'd like to see it. UConn avenge the Creighton loss in the championship game would be great.
I love it. I think I have the same thing, and I'm also in that pool, so maybe it'll come down to tiebreakers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Not you, Matt. This is a promo. Have you turned down the volume and all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring your biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, this tourney hasn't disappointed at all, and it just got started, and it really does. We'll talk upsets and an update on UConn's bracket after this. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Oakland Golden Grizzlies are this week's Nissan Rogue. The team surprised us all with a powerful performance in the first round upset against Kentucky, giving them the biggest win in program history. They say win life, go rogue, and that's exactly what the Golden Grizzlies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, Matt, the tourney so far has not disappointed. I stayed up late last night. I watched Samford, Kansas. I covered the SoCon conference for Sports Carolina Monthly for years, so I had a keen interest on if Samford could make that upset. What did you watch of the tournament yesterday? I know some of us are, basketball junkies. I have a TV in my office, so even when I'm working, I have the games on and everything that goes with it. What are your thoughts so far of the tournament?
Yeah, so I have a TV as well and have it on the background, trying to watch as much as I can in between everything else going on. So I saw BYU screw me in the Survivor pool. They took one of my teams out there, and then Texas Tech did finish me off, my other team off in the second later at night. But yeah, not really. So obviously Oakland winning was a big surprise, but everything else was kind of you expect some of the minor upsets over the course of the first and second rounds, and didn't disappoint with that. It was, but pretty much uneventful. I mean, obviously Samford got screwed at the end. Wondered if James Breeding was on the call there, but yeah, that was disappointing. Would have liked to see. I don't think Kansas is long for the tournament, anyways, but that would have been nice to see that go down.
No, I don't disagree. I was a little. I kind of took a break and actually had a keen interest on the Illinois Morehead State game, and because Morehead State had some players, and I forget who said it on Selection Sunday, because this is UConn's bracket where Illinois is a threat to them, and I agree. Illinois is definitely a threat if they get to the Elite Eight, because they do have a 6'6" power guard who I think Steph Castle would be able to lock down, but that's a talk for another day. And they were neck and neck, and Morehead State was really looking like they could potentially do something, and just like the Big Ten tournament final, Illinois just went on this crazy run, and their defense kind of picked up a little bit. So I really thought, like, here we are, this quote unquote bracket of champions. That's something I've named it, and it could be Duquesne versus Morehead State in the second round, but it wasn't. and we got chalk on the other side. Iowa State won. They pulled away from South Dakota State, and Washington State beat Drake, the darlings of the MVC. So the bracket itself in the East is shaping up to potentially, you usually see upsets. Like on the other side, you had NC State and Oakland in Houston's bracket. So you probably won't see more on that side. It kind of happens that way where if you get a flurry, the next day kind of goes chalk. I could see Yale giving Auburn some trouble. What do you think about that?
That'd be great. Obviously, another Connecticut program, but I just assume that Auburn's going to take care of business. I mean, we know there's upsets every year, but every time I try to pick which one it's going to be, it's never correct. So,
so what you're saying is that we should have you on, and whatever you pick, we should go the opposite.
That would be a smart move. You'd make your sponsors a lot of money if people took advantage of those free credits and went in.
We didn't have. We had game time today, but we have FanDuel every once in a while, so that may be something we have to consider for next year.
Perfect opposite, man.
So NC State is curious to me because the parallel to UConn is they won 5 games in 5 days at the ACC tournament and looked incredible last night against Texas. That's a tough Texas Tech team. It was a good matchup for them because I don't know how much you followed State, but DJ Burns is like William the Refrigerator Perry, but a post-up player. You just can't. I mean, I honestly think the only 2 teams that could give NC State like truly take that guy away are UConn and Purdue, right? Because they could, you have these immovable forces to kind of meet, and then, I take the guys who are 7'3" over the guy who's 6'9", 290. But did you watch any of that game? I thought they played incredible last night.
I did. I thought, I was hoping Texas Tech was going to make a run again. They were my second survivor pick, and I was banking on them, and then they couldn't get over the hump, and NC State just took care of business.
And then they get Oakland. If you told NC State, who was likely going to fire Kevin Keats, that you could be playing Oakland Golden Grizzlies for a chance to be in the Sweet 16 against, we don't even have a potential opponent yet, I think they would take that. I think they would sign on.
Especially if you asked them a week ago before the ACC tournament was over, because they probably weren't going to make it, right? They
were out.
Yeah.
Yep, they weren't a tournament team. That's so true. What matchup do you want? Do you want FAU or do you want Northwestern? We're going to assume, I know anything is possible, but I'm going to assume UConn beats Stetson today. So don't kill me if something crazy happens. But I would imagine that would be the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history. So UConn wins. Who do you want to see, FAU or Northwestern?
Don't have a preference. I picked Northwestern just because I assume the storyline seems easier. FAU, Dusty May, could have been a Final Four matchup last year. So I pictured that in my head, and I said, that's not going to happen. So I picked Northwestern. So based on the fact that I picked Northwestern, it'll probably be FAU.
I think I picked Northwestern too. So I can't even give you, hey, I'm going to pick the opposite. But if I go back into my bracket challenge, I am 100% positive that at the minimum, I picked Northwestern at least in one of them. And in this one, the one that matters, I picked Northwestern. So we're lockstep there. We'll see what happens. I just think Northwestern's a tough team, man. Like, they played Purdue tough this year. And in one game, they lost in overtime. And they shot 10 free throws to Purdue's 50. So they outplayed them. And if it wasn't for the Zach Edey whistle, which is what I'm calling that, they likely win that game. So that's not going to be an easy game. I think everyone's already kind of anointed FAU as the next opponent. And I think, what does Lee Corso say on game day? Not so fast, my friends. I think that's something that we're going to kind of look at tomorrow and say, we'll see a Big Ten opponent come Sunday.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, cool, man. Tell us, we got a few minutes. Please tell me, because I have to give you your flowers here. You are one of the biggest reasons why I am doing a podcast on UConn. Tell me about why you started Dream Season Pod. Tell people where they can find it. It is fantastic. I've shared it with countless UConn fans. And because it's beautifully done. It's thoughtful. It's just, I would imagine it's a labor of love. There's so much that has gone into this. Please tell people about the Dream Season Pod.
Well, first, thank you so much. I still, to hear anybody that listens to it and enjoys it is incredible to me. And then the fact that I've inspired you, I mean, you're doing such amazing things here. It's just, again, my mind can't really comprehend it. But so I appreciate that. I started it because I knew it was like the year after, because we might have been 2021. And I think Jared Cutler and some other people had, Chris Smith was on as a guest, Rod Sellers was on as a guest, and they talked a little bit about that year. And I've always been partial to that year. I was a junior in high school, and they always talk about the shot. And I knew there was so much more involved in that season than the shot. I mean, there's so much, starting with, going out to Alaska and the Dove NFL showing up out of nowhere, just going on a run out of nowhere after being destroyed by St. John's on the road, looked like it was a done season. I just knew there was so much more. And that was also the same time that The Last Dance was on Netflix. And I said, well, I wish somebody would do a Last Dance type thing on that UConn season. And I said, no one else is going to do it. So let me try to do it. So I figured out what I needed to do to get a podcast going. I had a couple contacts. I worked with Bob Usler at the Connecticut Sun years ago. So I knew him as a fellow Mets fan. We connected. So I reached out to him. I knew he was the radio guy that year, and he got me in touch with Wayne Norman, and I had another buddy that knew Rod Sellers. I got in touch with him, and off and running.
That's awesome, man. Before we go, I can say, people have even said to me, like, how are you getting people to come on the show? I think from one podcaster to another, you'd be surprised how many people want to talk about their lives, right? What their life's work is, what they've been doing for, their careers to get to this kind of point of inflection point. So would you agree with that? I think almost anybody that does this realizes not how easy it is, but how much easier it may be than you thought.
Absolutely. I mean, you had Smitty on. I had him. He was great to talk to. I mean, you can get Rod tomorrow if you wanted to. I mean, these guys will all jump on, and again, they love reliving their story. And that's another reason why I wanted to do that, was to help keep their memory alive. I mean, we're getting older.
Absolutely.
And a lot of UConn fans today they see the banner on the wall with the little square. They don't know what that means and what it meant to these guys. That just names to them. So I try to bring a little life to their story and help them live on.
It's been great, and I love having you on. Please come back. Before we go, I want to remind anybody that's watching this that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on free Fire TV channels apps. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Matt Edwards, I'm your host, Mark Zanetta, wishing you all peace, love, and as always, go Huskies.